Good morning and welcome to the monthly webinar series presented by WA Group. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Ron Linneman, benefits consultant for WA Group. Before we begin, a couple housekeeping items to remind you of. Number one, this is purely educational. We want to keep it that way from a time standpoint. We know your time is valuable. And so with that being said, there will not be any question and answer at the end of this webinar. Please type your questions into the Q&A. We will compile those questions, create answers to those questions, and then send out a frequently asked question later in the week. The second item is a replay of this webinar, and the slide deck is available upon request. If you would like a replay and or the slide deck, please send me an email at rlinneman@walivebig.com and we can shoot that over to you. Real quick, who's WA? We're a 100% employee-owned organization, 4 locations around the state of Minnesota. We've been around for quite a long time, about 127 years. And really our mission, what we come to work every day to accomplish is to impact the communities we protect and serve. And really the topic today is near and dear to my heart because it really has a significant impact on our communities and specifically your people and their families. What we do is we address risk for individuals and for employers, whether it's business risk, their personal risk, executive risk, or really what we're talking about today is healthcare risk. A lot of the conversations that we have is around employer healthcare risk. Today is about the risks that your employees and their families are dealing with on a daily, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. When navigating a healthcare system, really nothing is in their favor. And so identifying what your people are dealing with, what their families are dealing with, how it's impacting them, and then solutions that can help solve those issues. One of the comments that I usually get is, well, aren't you just an insurance agent? And insurance is certainly one way we transfer risk, but there are many other ways for others in particular. Ways you can address risk without insurance. Insurance is actually the most expensive way to address it. So if you would like more information on how we can help you, yourself, your business, your organization, we would love to connect. With that, I want to introduce John Hess. John Hess is the CEO of Athos Health. He's going to take the time to walk you through some of the challenges that your employees and their families face and some of the ways that you can get involved to help address some of those challenges. So with that, John Hess.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me today. Glad we could talk. As Ron mentioned, this is something that is really important to me and something that I have a lot of passion about. From my perspective, before we get into the deck and the slides, what you're going to find is I've put this deck around and the presentation today around kind of stories, and not just stories, but these are real things that happen to individuals we've worked with at Athos Health, and then specifically what you as HR directors, leaders in your organization can advise you and give your employees if they come to you. This is close to me. I kind of started Athos about 6 years ago. And one of the driving factors behind that decision was at that time I was working with Deloitte Consulting and had a very successful career. I was providing consulting services mainly to health systems, large hospitals, and around the revenue cycle, AKA how they collect money from individuals, from insurance companies. And I'd looked at a lot of claims, had done a lot of stuff, had great insurance personally, had Aetna, and my youngest was born, and they were born with a congenital heart issue. And about 10 months after they were born, they had to have open heart surgery. Now, we had hit our out-of-pocket max for the year because they've been born earlier in the year, and had the surgery. And thankfully, the most important thing is they're fine. You can't tell that they have this issue health-wise. But fast forward about 18 months, and never got a bill, never got an EOB that I remember getting, an explanation benefit from my insurance company. What I do remember getting is a letter from a collection agency saying I owe $110,000. And, my wife wasn't really happy, as you can imagine. But, I knew that something was wrong. There's no way we should owe $110,000. And so I called the insurance company, or called the provider first, actually. And they said, oh, the claim was denied. And it was denied for a silly reason. It was, they put a wrong number on a claim. That's it, right? One wrong number in one repealed. And I got sent to collections for $110,000. So I called my insurance company and fixed it with one call. But it got me thinking, and it's kind of genesis of what Athlos has become, was what happens to those people that don't look at claims for a living, right? They don't have to deal with the healthcare system because it's very difficult. And so we started Athlos as a patient advocacy. We work for employers. We help their employees navigate the healthcare system from a financial perspective. And what I'm walking you through today are 10 topics that we see as issues that allow us, that we think are important. So let me lay out some facts, right? How complex our system is. And these are 4 recent studies that just show how expensive and difficult to navigate. Even if your employees, you haven't heard anything from your employees, they're probably, dealing with the system. The first one is, and I just found this amazing, it's in the Bureau of Labor Statistics. In 2020, the average American spent 8.4% of their income on healthcare. That's health insurance, premiums, out-of-pockets, et cetera. Now, that doesn't include what you as employers paid. That's just what they paid out of pocket. And to put that in perspective, that's more than they spent on groceries, right? They're spending more on healthcare than they do on groceries. And for most people, they don't really go to the system that much, right? They don't use the system that much. They might have a couple office visits, et cetera. But for many of us, especially last year with COVID and the restrictions on care, it's even more amazing that that number is so high, because actually healthcare spending went down in 2020. In addition, I believe we're having a big problem with underinsured people. And what I mean by that is people can't afford their deductible, right? They get, or their copay or coinsurance. And a 2020 survey by Salary Finance found that 32%, almost a third of Americans, working Americans, are struggling with a medical debt, and 28% over $10,000, right? And when we think about the average, gross income, and the median gross income here in the US is about $66,000, right? For a family, that's a big number, right? $10,000 is a big portion of that. So it's really expensive. And surprisingly, people don't like the system, right? Or not surprisingly, I guess. So there's surveys that go out around different industries. And 73% of people this year like their insurance carrier. You're thinking like, wow, that's great. That's almost 3/4. However, when you put that in context, that's 2% worse than airlines and 1% worse than cell phone carriers, right? So people like their health insurance company less than they like airlines, who are notoriously a low-rated industry. And why is that, right? Well, some of it's the expense, who wants to deal with it? But another one is it's time-consuming, complex. And this one blew my mind. This just came out about a week ago. It was a study done by Stanford. In America, American consumers spend 12 million, I'm going to repeat that, 12 million hours on the phone with their health insurance company every week. Now, I think me and my team spend about half that, but it just shows how large it is and how big of an issue it is. And if you look at the lost wages, because most people are calling when they're at work, right? Or taking time off from work to deal with this. It's estimated about $47 billion in lost productivity, lost wages in the US economy every year. right? So it's a complex system, right? People are struggling with it. Even if you're not hearing it, they are struggling with it, I guarantee you. So what we want to do here, stop for a second, do a poll question. First one of the day, get some interaction. So here's a question. How often does your do employees at your organization contact you with healthcare benefit questions or issues? Is it never, quarterly, monthly, weekly, multiple times a week, or maybe you're not a role that's applicable? We'll give a minute here to let people get their answers in.
We'll give it a couple more seconds here.
Allows me to get a cup of coffee, I just can't spill it on myself.
3, 2, and 1.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, the poll, when I look at this, pretty evenly spread, right? Pretty evenly spread across. The biggest one was multiple times a week, and then monthly and weekly were, that makes about 2/3 of the total, the responses. And that doesn't surprise me, right? Like I said, it doesn't matter. From my experience, it doesn't matter how good your insurance is, right? Or what insurance you have. Now, some are better than others. We'll talk about that in a little bit, as far as like maybe less complex to deal with and have less issues. But it's a complex system, and it's becoming, more complex by the day. So
yeah, I think the takeaway here is the vast majority are being contacted by employees at a bare minimum on a monthly basis.
mhm.
I think one of the other items to bring up is specifically on the last point that you made with the 12 million hours a week. One of the common comments that I get from HR professionals is no news is good news. We haven't heard anything from our people. We're not being contacted regarding an EOB, right? Which means that it must all be working the way it should be working, right? And I think one of the biggest things to just be conscious of is that employees are dealing with these issues. They're dealing with it on company time, and you're not necessarily going to know about it.
Yeah. What's really interesting, Ron, just one little point, when we work with a company, what's engagement, everybody talks about engagement, right? And, our engagement sometimes starts a little bit low, if I'm completely honest. But what's really, really interesting, if somebody uses this once, they use this again. And you know why? It's because it's things they would have dealt with on their own. Oh, that bill doesn't seem right. This is going on, etc. But now they have a resource that they can use and solve it for them, and they don't have to take the time to do it. So what's really fascinating to me is, and again, this is anecdotal, no statistics here, but if we have someone help, we help someone, we help them again, and we help them again, and we usually help them 2 to 3 times in the year. So we're going to talk about the 10 issues. And again, these are from our experience. These are 10 things that we've done. We actually wrote a white paper about this, that I'm happy to share. We can figure out how to get that to you guys. It's a kind of a resource guide about the things that we see, and what, again, it's focused at HR directors, leaders, about what you can do to help your employees. All right, way we brought this broke down, just so you can know what's coming at you. We got 2 issues on each slide, and I'm going to add, and a question at the top, and it's like, have you ever had a bill that's just wrong? I have. And I've also received a letter that says that service has been denied by my insurance company. I've had both of those happen to me personally, multiple times actually. So first scenario is like, an employee just gets a bill and they don't think it's right. It's way too expensive. I can't tell how many people I heard say, wow, I pay this much in premiums and I'm getting a $3,000 bill. This can't be right, And it's really difficult to tell if a bill's wrong, right? It just is. I mean, I've had, and my team have had looked at thousands of bills to kind of know what to look for. And I can't tell you in a webinar what that is, but I can tell you one thing, and this is the most important thing, where to start. Employee or you think a bill's wrong from your provider, first thing you need to do is compare it to the explanation of benefits. I'm shocked at how many people don't do this. What does the insurance company say I owe? What does the provider say I owe? If those 2 numbers are the same, right? Well, it's not necessarily right. The bill's not necessarily right, but at least the problem isn't between the two, right? The provider's not overbilling you or billing you for something that you don't, the insurance company doesn't know about. The numbers are different, you got a problem, right? And typically the first place you got to go is to the provider and say, what's, tell your employee to go to the provider, what's going on? Why are you billing more than my explanation of benefit happens? One place this happens all the time is if you got a reference-based pricing plan, right? This is a common one where you'll see this consistently, where people get billed more than what the explanation of benefit says. And it's easy to get out in front of, but people just need to take the time and look, right? And that's that first step. Does your explanation of benefit match your bill? Issue number two is, again, employee receives a letter saying an expensive surgery was denied by the insurance company. And there's a lot of fear that follows, right? Because these surgery can be 20, 30, or my daughter's case, $110,000. Life-altering types of money. There's a reason why 52% of bankruptcies in the US, consumer bankruptcies, are due to medical debt. And this is a primary number one reason. It's because an expensive surgery procedure was denied. It's more likely to happen with outpatient procedures and surgeries. And overall, about 11% of all claims are denied by the insurance company. Now, some of those you'll never know about, right? Some of them the provider fixes before it goes any further because they need medical records, et cetera. 11% of all claims submitted by providers are denied. So 1 in 9.
Well, and what I see, John, is that it's never in our favor.
No, the best.
It's always more expensive than it should be. And it just makes me wonder how many of those bills are being paid by that member when it is incorrect.
Yeah, what's interesting is 100, you're not going to pay, I wasn't going to pay $110,000 bill, right? Because what happens when something's denied, it doesn't go through insurance. It like you have no insurance. It's basically you are a self-pay, uninsured patient at that point. And so you have to pay charges, right? And, or that's what you get billed. And you're right, Ron. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody like, oh man, I wish I had talked to you before because I've got this $500 charge that got denied and I paid it and they didn't even realize it, right? When we look through the claims history that the individual had, so what I tell people, again, the first question to whether, if that employee comes to you, I got this letter from my insurance company, what's going on? The first thing you need to tell them is to look at the explanation of benefit and to find out if they're responsible or not, right? Because what's interesting is there's lots of rules around that. I could spend a whole webinar talking about it. Nobody would come to it. But if the explanation of benefit shows that the patient's responsible for nothing, you're probably fine. That employee won't have to worry about it, right? Because what happens is they might need medical records. They might have it denied because it was a prior authorization. But because of the contract, if you're an in-network provider, the insurance company is saying, provider, you need to fix this. You can't bill the member. However, there are situations where it says it's the member's responsibility, not covered. And that's where the individual needs to become worried and needs to be proactive. They need to contact the insurance company, really understand why it was denied, and ask for help in fixing it. Because again, this could be 20, 30, 40, 50, $60,000. I mean, I was dealing with one of Ron's employees that had a $32,000 bill that got denied and they're being held responsible for it all. I mean, and it's tough. I mean, it is a really tough situation to have to deal with, and people are scared, right? Those are the big ones, but there's, like Ron said, there's a lot of little ones that pass under the radar and people just pay them and it doesn't go to out of pockets, or it's just like not having insurance. So make sure they check that EOB if they get that letter saying a service is denied. All right, we're talking a little bit about out of network, and the rules are changing here a little bit when it comes to like surprise medical billing. A new law is going in place in 2022, which is going to address some things, but not all. But the first one is, what if somebody goes out of network of choice, by their choice? And I know you're saying like no employee, that's too bad. The employee made the choice, they went out of network, shame on them. Well, that's great, but I'm going to tell you right now, the example I give here is a child's inpatient mental health care, right? I had a person here in Minnesota. Their adolescent was, and this was just the spring. Their adolescent was in the ER, and they needed to get placed to an inpatient facility, and there were no inpatient. The nearest inpatient facility was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. There was no open beds in Minnesota, in Western Wisconsin, and it was an out-of-network facility, right? So especially in mental health and substance abuse, which has been a rising, from my experience, has been a rising issue with, um, people can end up out of network, right? And it's just the way it is. And then they can get balance billed, right? And what is balance billing? It's basically the insurance company says, okay, we'll pay this. We'll run this through our network benefit. We'll pay the bill's $10,000. We'll pay two. And then typically, if there's an in-network provider, that $8,000 will be written off. But if it's out of network, the provider bills the patient $8,000, right? So people come and say, man, how can this happen? I thought this was covered by my insurance. And the insurance company said, it was. We paid $2,000. But they don't have a contract, so they don't have the protection. So what I tell people is, first off, make sure, if you can, there's some situations like the one I gave you about the mental health where you really, it doesn't matter, but check the network status of any new provider, right? And ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure here, by far, right?
My personal story with this, John, is when my firstborn came into this world, everything was in network, and the audiologist came in to test his hearing. Obviously, we had no choice in who that person was.
Yep.
Guess what? They happen to be out of network.
Yep. Now that's being addressed. That's what Congress addressed here. It's coming in law January 2022. They can't do that anymore, or at least they can't balance bill you. They can't surprise medical bill you for that type of service, where it's no choice provider. But if this situation, if let's say you check, yep, they're on network, I really don't have a choice. The first thing is, if truly, like the example I gave with the inpatient residential care is, it's a network. The network's not sufficient, or at least there's no open beds, right? So that's where you should contact the insurance company and ask for a either network app exception, or if you just don't have time and the child's placed there, appeal it saying it's just network inefficiency or insufficiency. Right? Then there has to be a provider that's reasonably, you could reasonably accommodate you within a certain geographical distance. It depends on the plan, 30, 50 miles and where you're located. But if there's no provider, like, you can appeal, tell your employee to appeal that, fight that, because oftentimes, more times than not, they'll win it. Lastly, if everything's exhausted, right, there's no rules against negotiating without network providers. Like, there are rules against negotiating against deductibles or co-insurance or co-pay or stuff that's in network. Out of network, no holds barred, right? So just because you get a bill doesn't mean you have to pay the bill. Now, a lot of employees aren't comfortable with that, but that is an option they have. The other issue is, let's say you get that surprise, right? In Ron's case, the audiologist, that's going away, thank God. We see that all the time with anesthesiologists, but the one that wasn't addressed in Congress was ambulances, right? Ambulance still, and most ambulances don't have contract with any insurance company. So if you take an ambulance, there's probably a 99% chance in this country that it's going to be out of network, right? And so again, the employee does that, they're surprised. This is another issue I was dealing with someone with a customer with one of Ron's clients or organizations, where it was out of network. It was, they were getting balance billed, because again, a lot of these times they're offered by municipalities, right? So the fire department, the police department, et cetera. And by law, they can't negotiate. They have to accept full charges. There's statutes, around that. So in that instance, like, the members got to pay it. So what they need to do is call the insurance, first try to make it in network. You should always have it go against your in-network benefits. But then even if it goes against your network benefits and you're still getting balance billed, that's when they got to call the insurance company and ask them to do to negotiate it, to pay the full charges. And most times, again, it takes one call and it's taken care of. Because again, the employee, in this situation, like, if you take a step back, why should the employee, ambulance is really expensive. Why should the employee have to pay those full charges when it's, it was an emergency, it should have been covered, and yet they're stuck with a big bill that doesn't, again, one of the challenges, it doesn't go against their out-of-pocket maximum, right? So, if they got a $5,000-$6,000 out-of-pocket maximum, you can tack another $2,000 to $3,000 on it for an ambulance bill that they have to pay out of cash. And, that's why people get $10,000 of or plus of medical debt. All right, we're gonna stop here. Got another poll question for you. All right, so here's the question for your organization. This is going to be, I'll say, your best guess, but for your employees, what percentage of your employees you think could afford their out-of-pocket maximum? So if they had to pay their out-of-pocket maximum today, what percent do you think could do it?
Looks like we have a majority participating here. Give it 3 more seconds. And there we go.
All right. Yeah, so most people said 25%, right? I'm not surprised by that. The next most popular was 50%. Nobody said 100%. And I'm, again, not surprised by that. Deductibles and out pockets have gone up, and most people don't save for it, right? Or can't afford it. So for here, we'll talk about benefits and what they pay and what options they have. Okay. So the second kind of flavor of my bill's wrong is, when it's not, these are all about when it's not wrong, right? So employee gets a bill or has a baby in this case, and they're shocked by the bill when they get it. Would be something wrong? Again, I pay how much in premiums, and I got $8,000 out of pocket that I have to pay for my, for my newborn. The bills are correct. Usually it's a lack of understanding, right? It's something where they don't truly, they might see the number, right? They might see the $8,000 in open enrollment this time of year and say, oh yeah, well, that's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to worry about that, right? But it does, and they're not ready for it, and they haven't saved for it, and they have no way of paying it. And so, what I think the first step in this is around education, and try to make it really, really clear, at a minimum, what the worst case scenario is, right? And break that down. Like, okay, if it's $8,000, if you got an $8,000 out of pocket max, we hope you don't use it, right? We really do. But if you do use it, you could be up the hook for $8,000. How much you have to save every month for $8,000, right? And you should be saving that. You should be putting that away because, again, if you think about it, like, yes, insurance is there for the catastrophic, for the, oh, I have something wrong, it's $8,000, blah, 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 blah. If I have a heart attack, most of it's going to be covered by my insurance company. But people aren't saving for the deductible. And what's different is, you have any car insurance that has $8,000 deductibles, or home insurance that have $8,000 deductibles? Maybe home, but that's less, like, your home's very unlikely to burn down, right? People just aren't ready for this, and then I think use pictures. I'm gonna give Ron some credit here. Last year, I was in an open enrollment conference that he was running with his employees about a new plan. And that was changing it was complex, deductible, there's an HRA with core insurance. And the most powerful thing he did was he put a little bar chart together, right? To show, all right, here's what you owe, here's what the co-insurance is, here's what happens, right? So the people could understand it. I see these tables that get put there by insurance companies. And for people like me, it's fine. For people on the phone, it might be fine. But there's some people that just don't pay attention to that, don't understand that, don't really look at that. So put it in visuals, right? And make sure they understand what they're on the hook for. And if possible, we can't be parents to our employees, but nudge them as much possible to think about that worst case scenario and prepare for it and put some money away. And then if something does happen and they're not prepared, like I said, right now, a recent Kaiser Family Foundation survey that just came out about 2 weeks ago said that 34% of people, of working adults, can't afford the deductible, right? I'm not surprised by that, because deductibles are high and most people don't save. And you do have some options. It's a growing problem, and I don't see it's going to stop anytime soon, as out-of-pocket costs are being switched more and more to employees, just naturally. One is there's financial assistance that they can ask the provider. This, if it depends on their income. It's usually got to be pretty low, but most providers, especially hospitals in the country, are nonprofit, and here in Minnesota for sure. So they, by rule, have to offer financial assistance. So if they've got a bill they can't afford, I tell people they should at least apply. They might get it all written off. They might get some of it written off. And then if they can't, if they're not eligible for financial assistance, use payment plans, right? Typically, I've never had a provider say no to this, whether it's a doctor group or hospital. But if they do a payment plan, it's interest-free, 12 to 36 months, depending on the the size of the bill and some of the rules of the organization. But have them put that money away, or spread it out. Excuse me. Don't have people use their credit card. I can't tell you. I talked to somebody that put $9,000 on the credit card, and I almost started crying for him, right? Because I'd much rather hold hospital money than I would a credit card company, because the rules around debt collection, the rules around how it impacts your credit score, the rules about what can happen to you, garnish your wages, are very different for medical debt than it is for any other debt in our society. So medical debt, while it stinks, it's better to have that than on your credit card or mortgage your future on something. All right.
I think one piece, John, just to jump in here, one of the things that I would assume people are thinking right now is, so now what? Where can I help? How do I address these issues with my people and their spouses, who I probably very rarely connect with? And I think it's just important for everyone to realize that there are solutions out there.
Right.
There are solutions to help create awareness, to help educate, not only just at open enrollment, but throughout the entire year. And then there are solutions to help support your people and their families to be their advocate. Obviously, Athos is one of those solutions.
Yeah.
So don't feel like, as employers, that now this is being added to your plate.
Right.
Want to make sure everyone is just aware that these are going on today with your people. But then also to make you aware that if you're interested in connecting and talking about those solutions for you and your people, that's kind of what we're here for.
Yeah. I really want to give you guys a toolkit, some suggestions. If someone does come into your office, you hear conversation around the water cooler, right? About these, that you have a tool in your toolbox, something you can I remember hearing this in a webinar. There's some solutions here, some advice I can give, right? Because this is really what this is, advice you can give your employees. All right. Preventative care was free. So when the ACA got passed, one of the things, and one of the whatever you feel about the ACA, one of the good inclusions was, we're going to have preventive care 100% covered by insurance. So we don't want people not getting colonoscopies, mammograms, et cetera, because they can't afford it or because they got to pay out of pocket. So, but it's caused some problems, right? I've had it happen to me personally recently, where I ended up a bill for preventative care when I shouldn't have. The common one is colonoscopy. A lot of times, again, where complexity comes in, you can have a colonoscopy screening for cancer, or you can have a diagnostic colonoscopy because something's going on. Well, depending on how it's coded and what procedure codes used, et cetera, the insurance company's gonna handle different ways, right? So a lot of people think they're getting preventative care and they're just shocked when they get a bill. And one thing I'll tell you is they should call, these things change, right? So for example, for any women on the phone on this call, the rules around mammograms just recently changed, right? There's a U.S. Preventive Care Task Force that sets the guidelines that insurance companies follow. They just changed the guidelines to mammograms. Now they're suggesting you start mammograms at the age of 50. It used to be 40, and they said, and the mammograms start 50, and they said for younger women, especially high risk with family histories of breast cancer, that they do something called the BRCA gene test, which gives people a probability that they have, that they could, have a gene that could cause cancer. But they changed the rules, right? And some doctors don't know that. So first thing I tell people, if you're going to have a screening mammogram or colonoscopy, make sure you call the insurance company first to make that it's going to be considered preventative. I'm 50 years old. I haven't had one in 10 years, blah, 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 blah. Secondly, if they do receive a bill, again, call the insurance company. They're the keys here and say, why did I get billed for this? And again, a lot of time it's a simple coding issue. For me, I went in for a preventative screening, just my annual visit. And I also have medications, and I was switching doctors. So I asked him to do a medication review and update for me. So I knew I was going to build an office visit and then a bunch of preventative care stuff that was going to be covered by my insurance. And what happened instead was I got billed everything while against my deductible, because I got a high deductible plan. And when I called, it's all because of what diagnosis was used. The primary diagnosis was the med check, not the annual visit. And because it was med check, everything got handled as a sick visit, and I had to pay against my deductible. The insurance company just had to switch the two, and then everything was preventative and was taken care of. So it can be fixed. It's pretty easy. Again, if people think it's wrong, it probably is. Have them call the insurance company if they come to you and talk to you about it. All right. The next one is one that hits home for me. It's about my prescriptions. And I take prescriptions, I said, and I'm always shocked how expensive they are, right? And what's really interesting is I've gone to the same pharmacy for years. Didn't even think about it. Walgreens down the road. Well, I never shop for my drugs, right? And a lot of plans is depending on what you get the same medication, but depending on where you buy it, what pharmacy you use, there can be vastly different costs. Vastly different. And so I switched pharmacies because I saved $60 a month that I didn't have to pay, because just by switching pharmacies, same medication, nothing changed, right? I switched from Walgreens to CVS. That's all I did. Now, what's also great about this one, if you're a self-insured plan employer, not only does your employee save money, but you'll save money. If they hit that out-of-pocket deductible, or out-of-pocket max, those savings are going to be passed on to you, right? So shop, there's a big difference. And then the other one is if you take a brand name drug, or if an employee takes a brand name drug, say, man, I can't afford this anymore. It's just so much. They should reach out, do a little search on the internet about with a manufacturer, because most manufacturer will pay your out-of-pocket, pay your copay, deductible for a medication, especially if there's no alternative for that brand name drug. To give you an example, there's a medication called Humira. It's for, it's a immune system drug. It's about $12,000 a month. So someone gets it filled on January 1st. They get a big bill because they had a deductible. Well, the manufacturer Humira will pay a lot of that, right? They'll pay off a lot of that. And that's an extreme, but there's, you can get medications, a lot of diabetics, they'll get a coupon for, if they got some new insulin drugs are coming out, they'll get a coupon from the manufacturers. There's ways to lower costs. One simple way is any brand name drug. If you or your employees take any brand name drug to come from you and they talk about the expense, the manufacturer probably will pay almost a big portion, if not all of that. We'll cover that for the employee.
Yeah, quick story on that one. We identified a spouse with one of our clients that was taking a medication, and it was costing them $500 a month. And through a manufacturer's coupon, we were able to get $450 per month from that manufacturer to help pay for that $500 medication. Yep. So they are out there, they exist. And again, there are individuals, resources, just like John, that can help identify those opportunities for you and your people.
Yeah. So we're gonna do a last poll question here. So have you, just personally, have you ever shopped for a drug to look on your website, look for the lowest cost pharmacy to get your prescription filled? I'll tell you, I'll be honest, until about 6 months ago, I did it. I have now, but I didn't. All right.
It's got a couple more that are filling it out. Couple seconds here. Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty evenly split, right? No's have it, 60 to 40 percent. But I encourage you, just personally, if you take a medication, shop. You can go on the pharmacy, you go on your usually if you go to your carrier's website and going through the portal, they'll have something about prescription drugs. You click on it and you can shop around. And it's most of the tools that I've dealt with, I deal with a lot for clients, are pretty easy to use. And you can make some pretty big savings, again, just by switching where you're getting that drug filled. And if you're open to mail order, that's even a bigger opportunity, because mail order is a great way to save money. You're going through your PBM, through your insurance, but getting shipped directly to your house, that's probably oftentimes the cheapest way to get a lot of medications filled.
I think what's interesting about 60% saying no is that chances are 60% are paying more for their prescriptions than they should. And then when you think about the employees and the people that they serve, if you're taking 60% of their company now is paying more for the prescriptions than they should, that number is probably a high number.
Well, and think about this the way, Ron, how many employers, if you think about the average drug spend as a percentage of the total cost for the plan, right?
Yeah.
What's the value of a 10% reduction in that? Right?
It's big. It's big.
It's a big number for, so again, this is something self-insured employers in particular, big opportunity here. All right, we're almost done. Two last ones. The last one's my shameless plug, but number 9 is about prior authorizations. One thing I've noticed since I started Athlos is the requirement for prior authorizations has increased. Again, this is where your insurance company has to sign off on a service before you have it done, right? That you need it. And especially where these really exist are in outpatient type procedures, lab tests, high dollar radiology tests like MRI, CTs. And this is a real story. I had an employee spouse is diagnosed with cancer. They need radiation treatment, and it required a prior authorization. However, it was denied. They said, nope, you don't meet the qualifications for this. It was a proton beam scan. You got to go more traditional radiology. And this is crushing for people, right? My doctor says I need this procedure done, and my insurance company says I don't. What the hell do they know? They haven't seen me. What are they talking about? I mean, you want to talk about something that's going to make people hate their insurance company? This is the one, right? And the sad part is it's typically just a misunderstanding between the doctor and the insurance company. Insurance companies have rules saying if you have back surgery, you have to have 6 weeks of therapy or PT beforehand. You have to have an MRI showing A, B, or C within the last 6 months. You have to have ... And typically what it'll be is, oh, they didn't have the MRI, they had the MRI 8 months ago, right? Or they had 6 months of therapy, but the doctor didn't put the notes because it's a separate organization that they don't have the medical notes for, so they didn't send them in. So from my perspective, these are highly solvable, and I'll bet you your employees will come to you with these types of issues. First thing they need to do is I tell them to call their insurance company, ask for a case manager to help them navigate this, right? Because that case manager, usually it's a nurse, clinician, et cetera, will help get the information, get the documentation from that doctor so that this can be overturned. Because it's basically, there's a checklist that needs to be checked, and for some reason, one of the boxes wasn't, and it's usually easy to fix, but you have to make sure that someone who knows what they're doing and can communicate back to the doctor knows that. And the first place to start is what you tell the employees to go there, call their insurance company, ask for a case manager to work on this with them, and help them solve it. And again,
I think just to make it even more complex, John, there's a difference between a pre-authorization and it being medically necessary.
Right. Yeah. You get pre-authorization, you still get things denied because it wasn't your benefits. There's crazy stuff. that happens, but in that space. But this is the one I've dealt with so many people that are just like, I mean, especially if you got cancer, you've got some a heart condition, you got some life-threatening condition, and the insurance company saying no, like, oh, you end up in front of Congress in that type of situation, right? I mean, that's what happens. And it's out there for sure. The last thing is people just give up. This is why, yes, a lot of you hear weekly from your employees, that's the most common, but some said, quarterly. My hypothesis is that a lot of your employees just give up, right? They just say too much. I'm done. It's too much stress. It's too much worry. I'm going to let that bill go. Whatever happens, happens. I've heard it all, right? It's because it's a fight, right? These things oftentimes are a battle. And so, what I tell people is, and HR directors, when I talk to them, is one thing is don't pick your insurance company just on PMPM, right? It's easy to go cost. That's great. And that's a big part of it. But you should ask some follow-up questions, right? Like, well, what's your denial rate on claims? Do we have what's the amount of service we have prior authorizations on, right? What's the network look like in my, remote majority of my employees reside? And I find, and again, I'm not doing, I'm not in Ron's role, I'm on the outside, but I see a lot of organizations I talk to that they made this decision because it was the cheapest plan. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's some reasons why they're the cheapest plans, oftentimes, because we price our services different based on the carrier, because we know certain carriers there's going to be more problems with than other carriers, and they're going to be difficult to deal with. And I can offline, if someone's reach out, I can tell you some stories around that, because there's pros and cons with every carrier out there. We get the pleasure of dealing with them all. And the last thing is, again, this is my selfless plug, but really, I believe that every organization should have an advocacy company with them attached with them. Whether that's Athos, I mean, obviously I love that, but I think it's important. This is complex. You need expertise. You really do. And if you think about it, and this is one frustration I hear from people. Okay, so something's wrong. I get a service denied. Who's going to help me? Well, is it going to be the insurance company that denied the service, right? I can call them and ask them to help me. Well, what's their incentive? Right? They denied it. Or it's a provider who will actually bill me more and try to collect me more than they get paid if it was covered. I ask them to help. Like, the issue is the consumer stuck in the middle. Your employees are stuck in the middle. The system is not friendly to individuals. It's painful. I completely, trust me, there's days I want to give up, right? I completely get it. I mean, a lot of these cases, I was talking to Ron before his call about one of his I was working with one of his clients. I've been working with him for 16 months now, 16 months. And we just got it resolved, right? That took 16 months of fighting, clawing, scratching, eye poking to get it resolved. We finally got resolved in his favor, but it took 16 months. Now, are your employees going to fight for 16 months? And it was $78,000, right? So it was a big amount. So, again, I think this is something where the service is usually pretty cheap, relatively affordable, but it's high value, because now, at least for Athos, we take that burden off the plate. We call the insurance company because we got connections. We can short track some of this stuff. And, it's something that's really, really, I think it's really important and valuable.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, obviously, everyone on this webinar is having trouble hiring people. Mm-hmm. They're having trouble keeping their talent. And so what is being done, if we all know that costs are high, it's unaffordable, the employee experience is next to none. There's no one there to help them. There's no one there that's going to advocate for them. What's being done to create a better employee experience, to create more awareness, to be that support for their people and their families, and to create a plan that's going to lower their out-of-pocket costs. It's going to be really one of the only ways that you're going to be able to compete in this really tough labor market.
And when you're shorthanded, instead of that, your employees taking time to call the insurance company, we're calling the insurance company. We're going to take that time that they spend away from work a lot, off the plate. And look, I can sit here and talk about how great I am all day. Nobody wants to hear that. Here are the last three, literally the last three comments that we received as of yesterday from our customers. I didn't cherry pick. I took the last three verbatim. And you can see people love this service. Now, look, most of your employees aren't going to need it. They're not going to need us, right? They don't need an advocacy company. They don't use health care. They're not big users. If they do, they're just going for office visits. Typically, nothing goes wrong with an office visit. They don't need it. But there's 2 to 5 to 10%, depending on your insurance carrier, of employees that need this. And when they need it, they're desperate.
Yeah, and that obviously goes back to the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your claims are going to be made up by 20% of your people. So that does make sense.
Well, I want to thank you. Yeah, I want to thank everybody. That's what I had to go through. Like I said, we've got a whole white paper with these topics and details that I'm happy to share for people on there. Just contact me or Ron, and can give you that. It talks. It's more of a paper, so it's a lot less abbreviated. Goes into more details, but I want to thank time, and this is something important about it. I really appreciate it. If you got nothing out of this, there's resources. There are ways to help employees. They do not have to suffer in silence. They don't have to suffer alone, and you don't have to be the saviors. You can be, but you got a lot on your plate, and there's opportunities out there. Just some simple advice or hiring an advocacy company to help you goes a long ways. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks for your time, your knowledge, and supporting our company, our people, and our clients and their people as well.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for taking the time to join us on this month's webinar. As a reminder, please type any questions in the Q&A. We'll formulate a FAQ and send that out in the next few days. If you would like a replay or the slide deck of this presentation, please send me an email. And of course, you can always connect with one of our team members here at WA Group on the benefit side if you have any questions and are interested in learning more. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you all for taking the time. Take care.